She was banished for loving the enemy, until a wounded Apache Marksman came back to keep his promise. The Arizona sunset painted the sky in blood and ash as the wind picked up the scent of dry earth and wild mesquite. Mariah stood on the edge of the Harmon encampment, her fists clenched, her chest heaving with fury. "You cannot keep me locked like some prisoner, father," she snapped. Colonel Harmon, still in uniform, his silver mustache twitching with barely contained rage, pointed toward her tent. "I will do what must be done to protect your name, and this family's honor. You've been seen, leaving camp after dark. Again. Mariah's eyes blazed. "You mean you're ashamed I speak with someone who isn't dressed in blue wool? You're ashamed because I see a man where you see a savage." He stepped forward, jaw tight. "You will not speak of that creature again. He is a prisoner of war. An Apache Marksman. You disgrace everything your mother believed in." "I don't care," she hissed. "You can lock the gates, chain the doors, I will still find a way to live." He leaned close, voice low and sharp. "If I have to send you east in chains to a boarding school, where the walls are stone and the prayers never end, I will. You'll thank me one day." Mariah turned without another word and ran. Her boots kicked up dust as she sprinted through the gully behind the stables, past the water troughs, over the ridge where the desert widened. The sun slipped lower behind the mountains, shadows lengthening across the valley. She reached the tree just as the first star blinked into view. The juniper stood tall and ancient at the edge of a dry arroyo, its twisted branches shaped by wind and time. They had met there a dozen times before, under moonlight and cloud, always careful, always quiet. But tonight was different. Cyan was already there, crouched near the trunk, his dark eyes scanning the ridge behind her. "You came," he said softly. "I had to." He stepped forward. His shirt was torn at the sleeve, the fresh scar across his collarbone barely healed. His fingers were calloused, his breath steady, though Mariah could tell he had not eaten well in days. "They know," she said. "My father. He threatened to send me away." Cyan nodded. "Then we leave. At the next full moon." She looked up at him, voice trembling. "They will hunt us." He opened a pouch at his side and pulled out a small wooden box. It was carved roughly but with care. The lid bore the image of an eagle, wings spread wide. Inside, a strip of blue cloth, hers, and a lock of black hair. "It is my promise," he said, "to take you away, somewhere without fences." Mariah took it into her hands, holding it like something sacred. "Then I swear too. I'll be here, no matter what." They pressed their foreheads together in silence. A crack echoed through the canyon. Cyan's head jerked up. "Run," he whispered. But before either of them could move, soldiers burst through the brush, rifles drawn. Dogs barked. Lanterns flared. "Get away from her," one shouted. Cyan turned to shield Mariah, but a shot rang out. He gasped and staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood spread across his sleeve. Mariah screamed. Hands grabbed her from behind, dragging her away. She reached out, fingers straining toward Cyan, who had fallen to his knees, his face twisted in pain. "Mariah," he choked. "Let me go," she screamed. "Cyan." But they pulled her back, her heels scraping the ground, the wooden box still clutched in her hand. As she was thrown into the back of a covered wagon, the last thing she saw was Cyan's silhouette under the juniper tree, lit by torchlight and surrounded by rifles. The tree stood tall, silent, witness to a promise made in love and broken by war. The walls of the Santa Fe convent were thick with centuries of silence. Built from sun-baked adobe and cloaked in ritual, it was meant to cleanse souls. But for Mariah Harmon, it felt more like a tomb. She arrived without chains but not without punishment. The journey from Arizona had taken 3 days. Her wrists bore red rope marks, her father's way of keeping her safe. When the arched door shut behind her, it sounded like exile. Sister Annunziata greeted her with cold eyes and a clenched crucifix. "The devil wears many faces," she said. "Yours must be stripped of his touch." Mariah said nothing. Her jaw ached from biting back emotion. Her cell was narrow, with a straw mattress, a water pitcher, and a wooden cross nailed above the bed. That night she lay without sleeping, clutching a cedar-scented box beneath her blanket. She didn't open it. Not yet. Life inside the convent ran like clockwork: dawn prayers, silent meals, scripture, chores, rosary, and lights out. Days blurred. The world beyond those walls faded. Mariah, once sunlit and fierce, began to wither under stone and scrutiny. The sisters never struck her, but judgment shadowed every step. They whispered when she paused too long at a window. Sister Annunziata in particular was relentless. "They are wild things," she said one morning while folding linens. "The Apache. No soul like ours." Your heart was deceived. Mariah's hands shook. She stopped speaking. She locked away every memory of Cyan, his voice, his bloodied shirt, the feel of his hand in hers beneath the juniper tree. Every night, when the halls quieted, she'd reach for the box hidden under her cot. She didn't open it. She just held it, running a fingertip over the carved eagle, letting memory speak where words couldn't. And still she wrote. Scraps of letters to Cyan, to anyone who might remember who she was. She hid them in baskets, books, chapel corners. None came back. So she drew. With charcoal stolen from the hearth, she began to sketch Cyan's face on her wall. First in lines, his brow, jaw, the braid over his shoulder. Then in detail, the scar near his collarbone, the look he gave her when he handed her the wooden box. The sisters painted over it. She drew him again. Until the day everything changed. One Sunday, just before Vespers, Sister Clara stopped her in the corridor and handed her a folded paper. "This came from Fort Kearney," she said. "You should hear it first." Mariah unfolded it with shaking hands. Brief. Cold. Engagement near Silver Bend. Apache ambush. Several dead. One identified as Cyan, son of Chaska. Body unrecovered. Confirmation based on markings. The paper slipped from her hands. She didn't scream. Didn't faint. She simply returned to her cell, opened the box for the first time in months, and stared at the fading cloth and lock of hair inside. She lay beside it on the floor, not weeping, just silent, just still. The drawing stopped. The letters ceased. The fire inside her, once bright, dimmed to a dying coal. The sisters called it healing. They believed surrender meant salvation. But they were wrong. Mariah wasn't healed. She was hollow. And in that hollow, not even prayer could bloom. The road to Santa Fe had changed little in 3 years, still sun-scorched, still cut through with dry riverbeds and cactus-strewn hills. But Cyan was not the same man who had once knelt under the juniper tree with blood on his sleeve and love in his eyes. Now, he walked with a limp, the old bullet wound buried deep in his shoulder flaring with every step. His left hand, though still steady with a bow, had lost its full grip, and his heart, well, that had long since gone quiet. He reached the edge of the village just past noon, his shadow long behind him. Dust clung to his boots. His dark hair, once braided and proud, was now tied loosely beneath a weather-worn bandana. The townspeople noticed him immediately. He felt their eyes like pinpricks on his back. Their hands paused at laundry lines, at market stalls, at water pumps. A native man, limping, alone and unarmed, was still a threat in their eyes. But Cyan did not flinch. He passed the blacksmith, the mercantile, and the chapel, his gaze scanning rooftops and steeples, searching for something, someone. Over his shoulder hung a satchel, inside of which sat a small wooden box carved with the image of an eagle. He had kept it safe through blood and exile, through desert nights and fevered dreams. He had almost tossed it into the fire once, but something had stopped him. A whisper, a memory, a promise. He reached the town square and paused at the well. A group of children played nearby, laughing as they chased each other around the wagon carts. One of them, a boy no older than 7, cried out. His arm had gotten stuck in the old grinding wheel beside the well. The others backed away in panic. The boy wailed. Cyan moved without hesitation. He knelt beside the child, ignoring the pain in his joints, and gently examined the jam mechanism. With careful fingers he dislodged the boy's wrist, cradling it with a hunter's grace and a father's caution. "It's not broken," he said softly. "But you must not play here again." The boy, still sniffling, nodded. His mother rushed forward from a nearby shop, eyes wide, but before she could speak, Cyan had already stepped away. Behind him, murmurs rose. Not all kind, but not all cruel either. That one, he helped. Maybe he's not one of the raiders. Look how he moved, like he's seen real pain. Cyan ignored it all. He made his way to the convent gate. A nun stood just within the iron bars. She eyed him warily, her hand resting near the rosary at her waist. "I seek someone," he said. "Mariah Harmon." The nun blinked. "You are? Family?" "No," he answered, "but I carry something of hers. From long ago." The nun hesitated, then gave a slow shake of her head. "There is no Mariah Harmon here." Cyan's jaw tensed. "Has she left?" "I'm not permitted to say." He nodded once, then turned away. He would not force the truth. Not here. Not in a place of stone and silence. He walked to the chapel steps and sat down, letting the sun warm his back. His wound ached, pulsing deep under the muscle. He had traveled far, farther than he should have in his condition. But something inside him said he was not wrong. She was close. He could feel it. The promise still pulled at him like a tether across time. And then, just as the chapel bell began to toll for the afternoon procession, he saw her. She moved through the courtyard like a shadow in white, her head bowed, her hands clasped before her. 3 years had carved changes into her face, more solemnity, less laughter. But the shape of her was the same. Her walk, the delicate slope of her shoulders, the way she paused mid-step, as if sensing the shift in the air. Their eyes met. It was like a thunderclap, silent but soul-splitting. Mariah stopped. Cyan stood. For a heartbeat, no one else existed. She blinked. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but the line of nuns behind her moved forward, urging her on. She turned her face away, stepping back into the rhythm of prayer. But her hands trembled. And Cyan knew. She had not forgotten. She had not vanished. She was here. And so was he. The night was thick with wind and memories. Clouds moved like restless ghosts across the moon, casting shadows that danced over the high desert. The convent loomed in the distance, its windows dark, its gates locked. But one figure moved through the mesquite and sagebrush like a whisper breaking rules that had long since broken her. Mariah ran barefoot. She had waited until the midnight bell, then slipped through the kitchen corridor, past the herb garden, and over the low back wall where ivy had grown wild. She did not stop to think. She just followed the ache in her chest and the pull in her bones, to the place where it had all begun. The juniper tree was no longer a tree. Only a blackened stump remained, struck by lightning the summer after she was taken. The ground around it was cracked and dry, as if it too had mourned. She reached it and stopped, breathing hard, her heart racing louder than her steps. And then, from the darkness he stepped forward. Cyan. He moved with the careful gait of a man who had learned to live with pain, but the moment he saw her, he stood tall. His breath caught in his throat as he looked at her, truly looked. Mariah, he said, voice rough. She took a trembling step closer. I came here, he whispered, 3 times. I waited. You never came. Her eyes stung. They took me that night, straight to Santa Fe. I was locked away. No letters, no word. I thought you were dead. Cyan exhaled sharply and pulled something from his coat. The small wooden box, the one with the carved eagle. I carried this every day, he said, even when I wanted to forget. Mariah reached into the fold of her dress and pulled out hers. 2 boxes, identical, worn by time but whole. She held hers against his. And that was when it broke, the silence, the hurt, the years between. I thought you abandoned me, he said, voice low. I thought, you chose them. I never did. I never would. Her hand shook. I survived. That's all I did. Cyan took a step toward her, then another, until they were only inches apart. The smell of rain clung to their clothes, though no rain had fallen yet. They were both thinner than they had been, scarred in different ways. But their eyes still knew each other. He touched her face gently, not as a lover, but as a man confirming something real. She reached up and held his hand against her cheek. Cyan, she whispered. Is this real? Yes, he said, but not for long. A chill passed between them. What do you mean? She asked, suddenly alert. I made a deal, he said. My people, those who remain, are being hunted, starved out of the canyons. I offered myself, in exchange for amnesty for the elders and children. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. I report to the fort at dawn, he said. After that I do not know. Mariah's knees weakened. She leaned against the stump, the past and present crashing together too fast. You're giving yourself up? She said. It was the only way, he replied. I do not matter as much as they do. You matter to me, she said, and this time her voice cracked. You always did. They looked at each other, eyes full of sorrow and fire. Then, wordlessly, they fell into each other's arms. It was not a hug born of forgiveness or reunion. It was desperation, the kind of embrace that speaks of lost time, of things too broken to repair but too sacred to leave behind. Their bodies remembered what their minds could not explain. They stood together, beneath the skeleton of the juniper, holding on to something no war or doctrine had been able to kill. Not yet. Not tonight.
The forest beyond Santa Fe stretched wild and ungoverned, where moonlight filtered through pine and juniper, and the wind carried only the scent of wet earth and ancient sorrow. Cyan led Mariah through the brush with the sure step of a hunter, though every few feet he staggered slightly, his old wound flaring from the rush of escape. She stayed close, her fingers brushing the back of his coat, neither of them speaking. as if words might shatter the fragile thread holding this night together. They found a hollow beside a stream, half sheltered by overhanging stone and a ring of mesquite. Cyan gathered dry wood from a fallen branch and built a small fire, his hands trembling slightly. Mariah sat across from him, arms wrapped around her knees, watching his every movement. "It's strange," she said softly. "The silence here feels louder than the prayers in the convent." Cyan glanced up at her, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "That place, it caged you." "And it nearly worked," she replied. "I forgot how to speak, how to move without permission." She paused. "But I never forgot you."
Cyan took a long breath and sat beside her. "My brother's name was Tahali," he said. "He was only 17. Sharpest shot in our camp. Used to carve birds into the trees with his arrows. He died 3 months after they took me. They said it was a misunderstanding. One of your patrols mistook him for a raider." Mariah closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." "They buried him beneath a red sandstone ridge," Cyan continued. "No ceremony. Just stone, dirt, and wind. I wasn't there." His voice cracked, the edge of pain slicing through even the calm of his tone. Mariah reached for his hand, and this time he did not pull away. "I wasn't there for my mother's death either," she said. "They didn't even tell me. Just said she passed while I was under correction. I found out months later, through a prayer card." Their fingers stayed linked as silence fell again, this time not heavy, but shared. A rumble in the clouds overhead made them both look up. The moon slipped behind a veil of gray, and rain began to fall, first gently, then with insistence. The fire hissed and dimmed, but they didn't move. Cyan stood and held out a hand. She took it. Together they stepped out into the open clearing. The rain soaked them quickly, washing dust and salt from their skin. Mariah tilted her face upward, her eyes closed, lips parted. Cyan watched her, the way her hair clung to her cheek, the way her chest rose and fell with every breath. She looked at him.
And in that gaze, there was no guilt, no fear, only truth.
He stepped closer, brushing wet strands of hair from her forehead. "Let me see," he said, nodding to her arm. She pulled up the sleeve of her shift, revealing a deep, ragged cut along her forearm, inflicted during her escape. Cyan winced as he knelt beside her, retrieving cloth from his satchel and gently pressing it to the wound. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the pain in his shoulder, the one that never healed. Still, he wrapped her arm carefully, knotting the bandage with a precision that spoke of both tenderness and determination. "You always did everything with your hands," she said, voice quiet. "Even love." Cyan looked up. "I have no other language." Neither spoke for a moment. Then she leaned down and kissed his brow. Slow, steady, like the beginning of a prayer. And he rose to meet her, his arms encircling her back, pulling her in, not out of desire, but desperation. They kissed again, deeper now, not hurried, not rushed, but as if memorizing something they had only dreamed about. The rain softened around them, but their hearts pounded louder. Clothes were peeled away, layer by soaked layer, until skin met skin. They lay down on the soft pine needles, the warmth of their bodies warding off the cold night. It was not lust. It was not even comfort. It was memory, returning in the form of touch. It was the collision of past and present. It was proof, spoken through breath and fingertips, that they had once loved, and somehow, against every cruel twist of time, they still did. Cyan held her like she was made of glass and fire. Mariah traced the scar on his shoulder, then rested her palm over his heart. They did not cry. There was no need. The storm passed as quietly as it had come, leaving behind a sky full of stars. And in the hush that followed, two scarred souls clung to each other, not to escape the world, but to finally be real inside it, for however long it lasted. The horizon was only a suggestion when Cyan rose in the cold pre-dawn. The fire had long since died. The air smelled of pine and fading rain. He sat for a while, watching the light creep into the world, the weight in his chest growing heavier with every second. Mariah lay curled beneath the hide he had wrapped around her, her breathing soft, peaceful. Too peaceful. He stood slowly, careful not to wake her. The saddlebag was already packed. His knife, his bow, and the wooden box, all in place. He moved like a ghost, a man trained in vanishing. He had made up his mind. One man for many lives, his life. That was the cost. He took one last look at her before turning away. But he had only made it a few steps when her voice pierced the stillness. "Do not take another step." He froze. Mariah was sitting up now, blanket falling from her shoulders, her eyes fierce despite the tears pooling in them. "I knew you would try this," she said, rising. "Leave before I could stop you. Spare me the pain of watching." Cyan turned, the ache in his eyes matching hers. Mariah, you do not belong in that place. Not this time.
I belonged there 3 years ago, she said, stepping toward him. And you came for me. You risked everything. Now it is my turn.
He shook his head. You have a chance. A future. If I turn myself in, they may honor the deal. But if you come with me, then I die beside you if I must, she interrupted. Because I will not live another life behind walls while the only man who ever saw me, truly saw me, walks into death alone. Cyan's hands clenched at his sides. This is not bravery, he said. It is madness. Mariah reached into her pocket and pulled out the wooden box. This, she said, holding it up, was never about surviving. It was about keeping a promise. If you die to protect your people, then I will live to carry your name. And if they break their word, if they put a bullet in your back, I will be there to see it. I will carry the truth to the end. He stared at her, jaw tight, torn between fury and awe. Or, she said softer now, stepping into his reach, you can stop pushing me away and finally accept that we were never meant to make this journey alone. Silence fell between them like a breath waiting to be exhaled. Then Cyan touched her cheek with the back of his hand. You always were the stubborn one, he murmured. And you always were too noble for your own good. They saddled the horse together. The same black mare he had ridden into town. Mariah climbed behind him, arms wrapping around his waist, her heart pounding against his back. They rode out just as the sun broke over the mountains. The light was golden, soft, too beautiful for the path they were taking. But they did not look back. Together they rode toward the military outpost at El Rito. Not because they hoped for mercy, but because they had chosen, finally, not to run.
Not from war, not from love, not from each other. The sun was high by the time Cyan and Maria reached the outskirts of Fort El Rito. The military outpost loomed ahead, all sharp lines and silent guns, a square of iron will hammered into the red dirt of the New Mexico territory. Soldiers paced the parapets. A flag flapped above the command hall. The gates creaked open slowly as they approached. Cyan dismounted first, his hands raised, empty. Mariah slid down behind him, her chin high despite the dust on her skirt and the weariness in her bones. The guards surrounded them, rifles raised, unsure what to make of a native man arriving without weapons and accompanied by a white woman in travel-worn clothes. I'm Cyan, son of Chaska, he announced. I've come to surrender. For the safety of my people, I stand by the terms offered. There was a moment of stunned silence. One soldier lowered his rifle just slightly. An officer stepped forward, Captain Rourke, hard-eyed, silver mustache, the kind of man who had seen too many broken truces and buried too many men under false flags. I know who you are, he said. We didn't expect you to actually show. Cyan nodded once. I gave my word. Rourke looked past him to Maria. And who is she? Before Cyan could speak, Mariah stepped forward. My name is Mariah Harmon, daughter of Colonel Reuben Harmon, U.S. Empire. A murmur swept through the gathered men. Rourke's brow lifted. Harmon's girl, you vanished 3 years ago. They said you'd gone west? Disgraced? I was imprisoned, she said coldly, for love. She reached out and took Cyan's hand. Some of the soldiers flinched at the gesture. I stand here not just as his witness, she continued, but as his equal. If you mean to kill him, if that was always your plan, then you'll have to kill me first. Gasps, Rourke's mouth tightened. Cyan turned to her, his voice strained. Mariah.
No, she said, squeezing his fingers. You are not doing this alone. Silence fell, heavy and electric. Then a voice rose from the crowd, hoarse, older. It came from a man with weathered skin and medals clinking on his chest, Sergeant Tom Briggs. The kind of soldier who remembered every man he owed a debt to, and every name that death took too early. That's him, Briggs said, stepping forward. 3 winters ago, Apache raiders ambushed us near Canyon Ridge. My son Eli was 17. Got caught in the rocks with a busted leg. This man, Cyan, he dragged him out. Took an arrow doing it. Rourke turned sharply. You sure? Dead sure, Briggs said. I recognized the limp. The captain looked between the old sergeant, the Apache Marksman, and the girl with Harmon's fire in her voice. The air cracked with possibility. Finally, Rourke spoke. You should hang, he said to Cyan. For the raids, the bloodshed. For all of it. Cyan met his gaze without flinching. Then do it. Rourke looked at Mariah. And you'd really die for him? She didn't blink. I already did. 3 years behind walls. He exhaled slowly, then turned to the soldiers. Prison isn't justice for a man who kept his word when none of us expected him to. And exile, well, sometimes it's more honest. He faced Cyan again. You're not walking free, he said. But you're not swinging from a rope either. You'll be sent to the outer territories. Border patrol. Dangerous work. Little pay. No glory. Cyan nodded. So be it. You leave tomorrow at dawn. Until then, you stay in the holding barracks. Alone. And the girl? Another soldier asked. Rourke sighed. She stays too. I'm not putting Harmon's daughter in chains, but she's not going anywhere. Mariah turned to Cyan, her breath catching in her throat. He gave her a small, tired smile. It's not death. It's not life either, she said softly. But it's time, he replied. More than we thought we had. Briggs stepped forward again, tipping his hat. Thank you, he said to Cyan, for Eli. Cyan inclined his head. And as the sun burned high above the fort, casting long shadows across the red soil, the two lovers were led into separate quarters, not free, not doomed, but alive, and still holding on. The wind on the high plateau was colder than in Arizona, but it carried peace instead of gunpowder. The land stretched wide, painted with mesas and scrub grass, where the horizon touched sky, and the silence no longer held fear. Cyan stood barefoot on the ridge, hammer in hand, his shoulder aching with each strike, but his heart steady. He was building something. Not a house, not a fort, just a tree. Or rather, a frame. Made of driftwood and stone, curved to hold the branches of a young juniper sapling, rooted in the red dirt with stubborn defiance. Around it, he built a ring of stones and carved the initials MS into the largest one. Beneath it he buried the two matching wooden boxes, their eagle carvings facing each other. Mariah watched from a short distance, arms folded against the wind, a smile hidden in the corners of her eyes. He turned to her. It is not much. It is more than anything I have ever had, she replied. They had arrived in this corner of New Mexico with little but their names and each other. Cyan had completed his service along the border, 6 long months of hard riding and harder nights. Mariah had waited, taught English and arithmetic in a nearby settlement, and fed children of both colors beneath the same roof. Now they had land. A grant from a sympathetic officer, combined with the goodwill earned from Cyan's act of surrender, gave them space, just enough for a schoolhouse and a home. Mariah opened the adobe doors every morning to a chorus of laughter and bare feet. Some children called her Miss Mariah. Others used teacher. A few, the youngest, just called her Mama, and she never corrected them. White boys sat beside Apache girls. Spanish-speaking toddlers tried to teach others how to sing. And Cyan? He fixed fences, hunted, brought firewood. He never entered the classroom, but every child knew that if they were brave enough to read out loud, he would be outside, listening with quiet pride. One afternoon, a government rider came by with orders to relocate the remaining Apache families further north. Cyan stood in the doorway, rifle leaned against the wall behind him. You will ride out of here now, he said calmly, and not speak of this place again. The rider did. No one ever came back. And so the tree grew. Every season Cyan watered it, whispered to it, left tokens beneath its roots, stones shaped like feathers, bundles of sage, feathers from birds he never hunted. It was not the tree from 3 years ago, but it was theirs, planted not in hiding, but in light. One evening, as the sky turned the color of rust and lavender, Mariah leaned against him as they sat beneath it. Do you think the world will ever change? She asked. Cyan looked at her, at the dirt on her hands and the warmth in her eyes. I do not care, he said. Why not? Because we already have. She smiled, then rested her head on his shoulder. Above them the branches of the new juniper reached for the stars, and beneath it 2 people sat, weathered, but not broken, together. And in the quiet, Cyan's voice carried, like a prayer on wind. I was not born to survive, but you made me want to live. And now, even if the world forgets the promise we made, under moonlight and ruin, we still remember. We still keep it. Under this tree. Our tree. Thank you for watching. She was banished for loving the enemy, until a wounded Apache marksman came back to keep his promise. If this story stirred something deep in you, if it reminded you that love can outlive exile, bullets and silence, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more unforgettable tales of forbidden love, quiet heroism, and the kind of hope that grows even in the harshest lands, where the frontier was cruel, but love was braver still. Tap that bell so you never miss a story that lingers in the heart. Until next time, ride true and love louder.